Good afternoon, everyone. Could I have your attention, please? Welcome to our fourth monthly community Echo Conversation event. These Echo conversations are meant to share thoughts, resources, information, and personal stories that will spark conversation among participants about how to be better stewards of our planet and our local community of Newburyport. We hope that this discussion will be lively, transformative, and the community spirit uplifting. And we hope that it will spark a call to action. That's the whole purpose of us being here. Today's conversation topic is, do you know plastics can be poisonous? Presented by ACE steward Diane Lerner, right behind me. and will be the kickoff of our Senior Community Center's second Towards Zero Waste campaign, Plastics Reduce the Use. Diane has a lifelong interest in the environment and nature. When she retired, she joined the Sierra Club to get more directly involved in seeing where she could take action. She was part of their toxic group and spent time in a subgroup researching and fact-checking data on plastic pollution to put together a presentation for members to use to educate their communities and legislatures. We'll also have some brief comments from ACES President Art Currier, who will share his perspective on the community collaboration in addressing our waste and sustainability challenges, and some brief comments from Mayor Sean Reardon. We hope that his schedule permits it. Anyways. So there will be a question and answer period after the presentation and after all of the discussion. So hold your questions until that time. So, and then we will have a breakout conversation where we'll talk about different things that we personally can do and as well as the community to basically reduce use. Let's face it, it's changes of the practices that we've been used to. So that's really the challenge for all of us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Diane. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Okay. So as Ben mentioned, the purpose of this is to educate people on the problems that plastic poses to our health and our environment, and also its contribution to climate change, and also why it's so hard to make progress on these changes. So first, we should really understand the life cycle of plastic. So plastic comes from fossil fuels, and its production starts with the extraction of oil and goes through a number of processes. Some processes add chemicals and resins which are not bound to the plastic polymer, and they leach out. Some processes release toxic substances and carcinogens into the air and water. In the consumption phase, we find plastic in the packaging of products from food to most consumer goods, including synthetic clothing. It's in everything. So once discarded, plastic is either incinerated, dumped into overflowing landfills, or ends as litter. It's important to note that greenhouse gases are emitted at every stage of the plastic life cycle, from refining to production to the ways it's managed as a waste product, where it's contributing significantly to CO2 release in the atmosphere. Bottom line, toxins and microplastics are released into our air, food, and water, and creating risk in all stages of its life cycle. So people think they're doing their part by recycling, but of all plastic produced in the world, maybe 5% is actually recycled. The plastic problem is growing increasingly urgent because it doesn't biodegrade. It just breaks down into smaller pieces, which are about 5 millimeters in size, called microplastics. These particles are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to remove from our drinking water, food, and air. Over the past decade, scientists have found microplastics in every environment that they've tested, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains, from the tropics to the poles. We're actually producing more new plastic products at a much greater rate than we're able to use and reuse of the plastic that's already in existence. And big brands are increasing their production, threatening the global climate as well as communities and ecosystems. around the world. Unfortunately, marginalized communities bear the burden of this pollution because most plastic manufacturing facilities and waste incineration facilities are located in these low-income areas. How would you like it if your life expectancy was based on your zip code? Thousands of chemicals are added to plastic. Many of these are endocrine-disrupting chemicals, which can leach out and cause hormonal imbalances, heart disease, greater risk of cancer, reproductive issues, among other things. Plastic containing these EDCs are found in food packaging, cookware, construction materials, children's toys, and furniture, just to name a few. For example, phthalates are added to make it more durable or flexible and are found in products such as food packaging, cosmetics, toys, and medications. They don't permanently bind to plastic surfaces and can be released into the air and food. Bisphenols are used to make plastic sturdier and is found in the lining of food cans and reusable water bottles as some examples. Perfluorinated chemicals, referred to as PFAS, are also known as forever chemicals because they accumulate in our bodies and water and soil and never go away. They're added to make products resistant to oil, water, grease, and stains, and are used in things like Teflon cookware, disposable water bottles, the lining of food takeout containers, as well as firefighting foam and waterproofing garments as some examples. When we consume food or beverages contained in plastic, we're ingesting microplastics and leach toxins. Animals and fish eat microplastics, and it's now part of our food chain. Through normal water and food consumption, it's estimated that the average person consumes about 5 grams of plastic a week, which is the size of a credit card. Something I found particularly alarming is that animal studies have also shown that these endocrine disrupting compounds can cause DNA modifications across multiple generations, not just our own. So the 1 through 7 symbol that you find on the bottom of the plastics is not a recycling symbol, but rather it's a plastic or resin identification code identifying what type of plastic the item is made from. It has nothing to do with recycling. In fact, only 1 and 2 are commonly recycled. 2 and 5 are the least toxic. 1, 3, 6, and 7 are the most toxic. I won't go through each one of these, but I'll just give an example of some of them. For example, number 1 is polyethylene terephthalate, and it's commonly used in water and soda bottles, as well as peanut butter and mouthwash, and it can leach a toxic metal called antimony, also bromine and other things. Number 3, polyvinyl chloride, is most commonly used in clear food wrap, cooking oil bottles, plumbing pipes, and it contains numerous toxins that leach out its entire life. For example, BPS and phthalates, lead, and other things. Number 6, also polystyrene, also known as styrofoam, is a common material for making single-use disposable plates and insulated cups, clamshell food containers, for example, and it leaches styrene, which is a known neurotoxin. 50% of all plastic is only used once for an average of 15 minutes and then is added to our waste stream. Just as an example of things we don't even realize have plastic and affects the environment, microplastics are found in synthetic clothes. When synthetic clothes are washed, they release microplastic fibers that are too small to be filtered out by wastewater treatment plants. They pass into the rivers and oceans where they are ingested by fish. Synthetics dried in clothes dryers release microplastics into the air. The entire ecosystem is affected, and every year at least 8 million tons of plastic ends up in the oceans. By this year, it was estimated that at least a ton of plastic for every 3 tons of fish would be in the ocean, and by 2050, there would be more plastic than fish by weight in the ocean at the current rate we are making it. By 2040, plastic production is estimated to increase more than 25% from the current rates of production. And plastic waste is permanent, and it's outpaced its recycling by 5 times just in the past decade alone. Today's waste disposal, recycling processes, and infrastructure cannot manage the complexity and quantity of plastic waste that is produced. We can't completely rid ourselves of plastic, but we can at least take steps to minimize the biggest part of the problem, which is single-use plastic, which is used once and thrown away. It's used in food packaging, consumer goods, bags, plastic wraps, etc. They're cheaper, so they're more pervasive and also extremely difficult to remove from the waste stream. Plastic waste is also the third largest type of litter on U.S. coasts. More than 1 million plastic bags are used in a minute in the U.S. Every second of every day, 1,500 in the U.S., 1,500 plastic bottles are discarded. Plastic water bottles have 22 times more like microplastics than tap water. And by the way, there's no kind of federal regulation of what goes into those bottles either, so you're actually safer just drinking your tap water. In addition to containing microplastics, plastic bottles also expose us to synthetic chemicals. Also, the process of producing a bottled water requires 6 times as much water per bottle as there actually is in the container. Talk about a waste of resource. Packaging is the largest end-use market segment, accounting for just over 40% of total plastic usage, and the U.S. produces the most plastic weight per capita than any country. It's not just food packaging that's a problem. Amazon's plastic waste increased 33% in 2020 with their air pillows, bubble wrap, and plastic-lined paper envelopes. That's equivalent to dumping a delivery van load of plastic into the ocean every hour. Their waste at that time could circle the globe 500 times. That was stats from 3 years ago. However, as a disclaimer, I will say that in 23, they did decrease their plastic packaging weight by 9% and eliminated air pillows in some countries. And that's also because of actions by environmental groups. So this is the Dallas Cowboy Stadium. It's the largest in our country. Imagine it filled from the very bottom of the field to the top of the roof, full of plastic garbage. In America, we throw away 1.5 times this stadium's size in plastic daily. Now imagine that 365 days a year, year after year. Where do you think it goes? China isn't taking it anymore. It's not really recycled. How much is incinerated and releasing all kinds of toxins into our environment? How many landfills do you think we can keep creating to hold this mess? If we keep increasing the production of plastic, which is already beyond the rate that we use, where does it end up, especially when barely 5% is actually recycled? Does this sound sustainable? And what does that mean for our world? So we've talked about the health impacts, how there's many chemicals, including endocrine disrupting chemicals added, and how they can cause hormonal imbalances, heart disease, greater risk of cancer, infertility, and other things. And we know there's microplastic in our food and even in our blood, and that we consume, on average, about a credit card worth of microplastic a week. As far as the environment, it's shocking to think that our current rate of usage and the resulting waste, that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. It's also equally eye-opening that half of this plastic produced is only used once for 15 minutes. And plastic production is estimated to increase more than 25% from current levels by 2040. And don't forget, it's permanent. It doesn't biodegrade. So the barriers to change are tough because it's hard for people to think of alternatives because it's so cheap and convenient. And the petrochemical industry is a very powerful lobby, blocking laws to regulate plastic and other environmental advances. And our incessant plastic consumption is cultivated by our throwaway culture, so this makes it very hard to get change. Plastic production has outpaced recycling by 5 times in the past decade. And most of it is incinerated or goes to a landfill. And today's recycling processes and infrastructure really can't manage the complexity and quantity. Recycling rarely results in the reuse of new products. because it's in the company's best interest to create new virgin products. And I actually saw a webinar just a few weeks ago that mentioned that virgin plastic is actually cheaper than recycled because of the collection, sorting, and processing costs. We can see our electric and gas bills go up, so we curb our usage of those things, but we can't see the impact of plastic in our environment or our health or our well-being, so it's easy to sort of forget about it or just turn a blind eye to it. So what can we do? We can refuse, reduce, reuse, lower our consumption, minimize single-use plastic, and in the breakouts, we're going to talk about some ways we can do that. So I won't go into some lists here. And we can also raise awareness to others and be an example. We can talk to legislators. One reason it's grown to this extreme is because of the lack of regulation. We can hold corporations and governments responsible and accountable. Disposing plastic waste costs our cities and towns more each year, and the companies making it aren't paying for it, we are. So they shouldn't be allowed to operate without consequence. We can get involved with groups in our community or start one. We can get on email lists of companies like these that are listed, Sierra Club, US PERG, et cetera. Changing the status quo is hard. Simply banning it outright isn't feasible. But however, single-use plastics have alternatives, and there's things that we can do to start making changes in our own lives. And just one last thing that I was going to mention, that on January 15th, the Plastic Pollution Coalition is having a webinar if you're interested, and it's going to be featuring advocacy and media experts about microplastic and plastic chemicals, how it impacts humanity. So that might be something worth going onto their website and checking out. And back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Diane. Our next speaker, unfortunately, is detained. Akaria, the president of ACES, during the holidays, he had an accident. He basically broke 4 ribs skiing, and he's been very slowed down since then. Unfortunately, he just sent me a note that he's not feeling well and in bed. So we'll pass over his presentation. As far as the mayor,
Unfortunately, I think he's not going to be in.
he's going to be delayed as well? Okay, if his schedule permits it and he comes, we'll fit him in later. But a couple of things, take the opportunity to have that scope of time. I'd like to introduce our to a zero waste team here that's working in the Senior Community Center. We've been started this project since October, the mayor is here, so I'll defer to him, and I'll speak about our project afterwards. Mayor Redden, we're just on time. Arthur is sick in bed, so unfortunately, not to see him. Nice to meet you.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. What a great turnout. It is freezing out there today, and I probably should have a coat on. Well, first, just thanks for being here. I mean, again, showing up is half the battle, right? And we're so lucky in Newburyport to have so many people who want to get involved in these types of initiatives and issues. I do think plastics is something that we can really tackle here in the city. And it's great that we're here in the Senior Center, too, because I know Sarah Landry's really been leading a lot of these efforts around sustainability here at the Senior Center. So I'm excited for I can't stay today, unfortunately, but I did want to come and just say that, you know, this work, this collaborative work that we need to do around making our community more sustainable really needs to start with groups like this who have the expertise that we can share with the rest of the community. I think Newburyport is a perfect place to do things like this because we're small enough that we can really implement things right away that can really have an impact, and then it can spread from there too. So, you know, we're trying to do this with our zero waste initiatives and trash, and I think, you know, tackling plastics in some meaningful way. I know I've had some initial conversations with ACES over my first couple years. Hopefully I get to do this job a little bit longer, and then we can really make a big impact in some of these things moving forward. So again, I think that's what I was going to come up here and say. I'm glad I walked in at just the right time, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.